I haven't been with you for a while because I've been moving my family into another house, recreating our life here in California. And I thought, what's a good way to get back to talking about heightened conscious and understanding, subject that I know much about and that I don't see out there anywhere. I'm trying to find things that I can talk with you about that others don't talk about. And let's talk about California, moving to California, and what it means and what the East Coast is like comparatively to the West Coast. I've been here in California going on 6 years. We moved out here in the easiest way we knew how because East Coast money was not worth anything compared to West Coast money. What we did to get out here and make it happen, we moved into a mobile home community because we figured, that's not a house, it's cheaper, and we can get started there and jump off from there and jump to somewhere else. So that's what we did. It's been difficult because what we met with in this wealthy area where there's extreme wealth and extreme poverty, whenever you go in these lower end areas, we met with a bunch of broken people. Over on the East Coast, we just called it lost or not lost, or lost or attempting to be found. But over here, everybody's wallowing around all over the place, every which way. I had hoped throughout my life that I would find, when I finally got here, enlightened souls that I could benefit from and grow with. One of the things I'd like to say that I have not gained from coming here is the ability to find an enlightened soul and grow with them. The best way to find an enlightened soul is to meet them up close and personal, to find out what makes them tick. Tell me and I'll forget. Show me and I'll remember. But involve me and I'll understand. Once I fully grasp the idea, the full understanding, and it's right there in front of me, you can't turn it off. Ideas never die. And when I learn something, I learn it so well. So if I'm a slow learner, it's maybe because I don't have the capacity, the tools in front of me to help me learn it. Let me just start off with my previous notions about California. My previous notions of the West Coast versus the East Coast were, starting from childhood. Over here, everything happens in the fantasy realm. Everything in front of me in my big, glorious television or movies or whatever that I had even as a child, it was all happening here. It was all being made to happen here. And as a child, we don't even know that it's not real. We think, just because it's on the TV, it's somewhere else than where you are. It could still be real, right? Even if it's a fantasy thing, a child doesn't know that it's not a possible thing to be immersed in a fantasy realm and have it be real. Well, if you've seen some of my other videos, particularly as far as Batman goes, back in the olden days, if you were an Indian tribe or something like that, you didn't have much to fantasize about. You wondered where the soul went, and you might think of, it goes into another bird or animal or a symbolic thing or whatever, into smoke, into the heavens to watch over you, or it's in the stars or whatever, we don't know. But in your daily life, it doesn't do you any good to fantasize. You're going to say, am I going to survive? Am I going to help this tribe? Am I going to be like that warrior? Am I going to be like that servant? What will I need to do to carve and hone my experience and craftsmanship of my own will and way to be like that? Everything's practical. Caveman days, probably the same thing. We're living in a world now where we have free time. But we're not only living in a world where we have free time, those worlds came before us as well. I've read that the first world that had that was the Egyptians. They worked hard, but they had free time on their hands due to the life-giving waters of the Nile and different things. They got to the point where they had more than they needed, and thus they had free time. One of the problems that's bad with us right now, and I say bad in the sense that just people aren't aware of it, they're not heightenedly consciously focused and aware of it in a joint unison way, is that we're exposed to fantasy so much that seems real to our subconscious as we develop. And it's bigger than a story. It's bigger than imagining in the stars. It's more realistic than a book because the image is there. The mind, while they're enticed into it and they're just relaxing, they have suspension of disbelief. The mind believes this is viable. This could be a way. And thank goodness for the Hollywood writers and actors and directors. They do, if we're well balanced, help our mind to expand and think, what can we think about that we don't think about? How can we expand ourselves, our heightened conscious? It's channeled and made to help us grow in ways they want us to grow. The almighty dollar has to propel it, has to be there in the first place before they can even get it to work, and it has to stay there. to prove that those people go on and do other things. So ultimately, the almighty dollar is what's motivating it. I had the privilege to work in the movie industry on the East Coast for a while, and I saw them right in front of me, those types of people, and there was something wrong with so many of them. Couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was innocent, naive, just coming out of school. But what it was I didn't admire the qualities that that type of thinking brings up in these people. I thought, oh, okay, well, it's just a small handful of them. I'm sure there's more out there. There's more out there, and I'm going to find the right ones. I'm going to find the better ones. I'm going to gain from them. And what I found from everybody on the East Coast is they're all restrained. They're all conformed. Just like you've seen some of my other videos, they all believe that God's out there and man gives the ability to you to see how God works. And if you buy into that and it comforts you, you'll gain what you may gain with being together with a bunch of other believers and working as a support mechanism. But you'll never be able to really convince yourself that that man knew what he was saying, or that way that he showed you really existed. So you're all controlled and restrained in certain ways because you're desperate. You're desperate. You got to believe this. This has to continue this way. You have to look down and judge others so that anybody that's different than you, that isn't subscribing to those things that give comfort, they must be wrong. It can't be you. This creates a divisiveness. Oh, there's so much junk like that over on the East Coast. On the West Coast, not so much. On the West Coast, everything's freeform. Some of the things I'll just pop into my mind here is like, people will walk across the street at the crosswalk, not even looking to make sure they're not going to get hit. They believe that the way their society is set up and the way their laws are, they're going to be protected. They believe that they need to just let themselves out there. They're not restrained. And some miraculous means by the world that we live in will provide for them. And I think I've noticed in a lot of stars and a lot of Hollywood people, they're that way. They need to be manipulated by the system in order to become and flourish and become what they are going to be. Stars have to have that confidence, and I used to think it was a confidence, but it's not a confidence. How can you have a confidence in a power beyond yourself that's going to make you be what you've got to be with no ability on your own to decide what you're going to be? That's not confidence. I mistook that for a confidence. What that is an inability to have heightened conscious. Just a few of people that have done very well, that had the right look, followed the right advice, had some good skill development, got lucky and got into some certain leads, certain places, maybe gave themselves in ways they shouldn't have to be elevated, and they got molded, and they did a lot of work themselves. Sure, they deserve it. They look the part, and they work the part, and they work hard, and then they go somewhere. But if they didn't have the ability to sign their life away, if they didn't have the ability to do whatever they needed to do by any means necessary, it wouldn't have happened for them. I didn't realize that when I came here. I thought if you could be your own person and make it happen, but only a few people can be their own person and make it happen. Even the tops, they still have to do what is told of them until they make it to a certain point. And even then, the most top people, they have got to serve the dollar. They have got to serve whatever it is that makes people watch it. They don't get to be artistic and creative and free. They could if they wanted to be, but then they'd walk away and take their eye off the prize, and they wouldn't be having the great grandeur of everything they built their empire into. There really aren't too many people that break the mold out here, that are defined and make their own way and don't serve the man. This is one of the ways that I am. I saw the restraint on the East Coast for what it was. I wanted something else, but I wouldn't make the compromise really you needed to do in order to be successful is to ride on the wings of things that will take you somewhere, and you'll have to live with all the compromises you'll have to do while you're doing that. I couldn't do that. So then you do also have the freedom, wallowing around and to see the ambiguity out here. If you don't want to be successful, you just want to live out your life without rigid people telling you this is the way it is, like on the East Coast. You have that over here as well. So that's in droves. But I have not found that it leads to any kind of heightened conscious or any kind of beneficial thing that we can gain from them. They're all over the map. It's very hard to find an idea that's really well-founded, well-developed. the ideas start to serve them in ways that they're only there because it helps them to gain what they want. Kind of like on the East Coast, the rigidity of the religious things would help them to feel secure, would bring them to another body of people that also believe that way, and they could use their relationships with them in that house of God or that assembly place in a beneficial manner. I never really got it back then. And this last time that I was with my family and I got lectured about not being a part of that group, they kind of made it more clear to me. But they didn't realize what they were saying and the holes in it. They didn't realize that what they were showing me was that they're not really there for God. They're there for what they can get. And that's not why we were to be there. And these people out here that have all this freedom, they're not in it for heightened conscious expanse and sharing of the wisdom for mankind and helping them out. They're in it for however they can give them a freedom. That freedom, in a lot of ways, has gained people power to be perverse in many senses of the word, and I won't define it, so don't alienate people, and say it's okay, it's all okay. Why? Because you can make up a story when you have an infinite pool of ideas to deal with that make it okay. It doesn't matter what anybody else outside of you says, because if you look at them only as restricted, and I've already said they're restricted, just like a conservative, everybody to them is a liberal if it's not like them. Well, everybody to somebody that's free and just floating away into nowhere land to have whatever they want can look at a conservative and say, everyone's restricted. Both of those concepts are wrong. There's this huge amount of room in the middle, and I'm in that area. But I'm not striving to just be in that huge amount of room. I'm striving to be in the exact middle, the exact heightened conscious middle, so that we can shed off everything that is erroneous, that is wrong in any way, and let it fall to the sides where it will, where those people will wallow into it and be trapped by it, and all the vices and problems that come with it, and all the deceptions and darkness. One of the reasons why I talk about the living word and the light of the world that Jesus said that he was because if you had that in your center, you wouldn't fall for any of the darkness. You wouldn't fall for anything. I remember when I use this example in a lot of the videos that I do, when the woman was going to be stoned for adultery, and he said, whoever is without sin, cast the first stone, and they eventually left. He told that woman, where did your accusers go? He must have said just the right thing that day, and those people had, I don't know whether they did it out of a sense of peer pressure or whether they really had their hearts speaking to them. I don't know, but the point is, they did leave. She was allowed to be left alone. His advice and instruction for her was to go and sin no more. It has to be doable. Otherwise, why would he be able to tell her that if it wasn't doable? Well, the East Coast people, from what I've observed in the formalized church, are constantly believing they're immersed in sin so that they need someone to help elevate them out of it. Sort of like the Jews needed the priests, they needed the sacrificial offerings, all those rules and litigious things that eventually followed them all the days of their life and became abominated in the way they were given to them through priests and mediators to the people, became so abominated they didn't even recognize the Son of God when he came. They had just become all about the litigiousness, all about the thing. Well, in a lot of ways, the modern church is doing that too. They need to constantly feel like that because they're immersed in sin, they need man to show them how to get around that somehow. And when they do that, they fail to serve the exact person they say they're serving, because he says, don't put your faith in man. Call no man father. We're all priests. The temple curtain was torn. We can go into the temple, and we have the ability to enter the holiest of holies after the thunderclap on the crucifixion. That's what that means. That's what he's saying. They're immersed so much that they could get somebody like, for instance, Trump in the White House and still vote for him. Antithetical points of view to almost anything that Christ would have. And still they vote for him because they believe a greater thing is going to be served. Oh, well, we'll get the Supreme Court justice. They'll legislate morality, and it'll be closer to what we realized that the Bible had. No, it's not closer to that. It's what the chosen people had. That's the morality. This is exactly this. And you follow it exactly, and you'll get this exact outcome, and God promises it. You know, that was the covenant that he made with those chosen people. They failed. They violated it. they were cursed instead of blessed in the end. That's why Jesus came and then helped us all, and eventually offered all of us to see the light. That system continues to follow the same guidelines in the formalized church as the stumbling blocks that caused the Jews to fail. Now, what do you have on the other side? They're always pointing fingers at them. Look at you. You've got all your immorality. And Jesus did say whatever bound on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever's loosed on earth will be loosed in heaven. But this is when you come together on that rock, and you come together in the church and do that. You can't just do whatever you want, because Jesus says whatever comes in your mouth won't make you unclean. It's what goes out makes you unclean. You can't just do whatever you want, because if you do whatever you want, you're using the flexibility and you're falling the same way that the rigidity people are being encapsulated and enslaved to getting things wrong. And then you're voting for someone, if you want to talk politics here for a minute, that'll just get that to keep on happening for you. That's just as wrong. What you need to do, and when I say you, I mean me. Every time I say you, I mean me, because I do it first. I have to do this. And it's hard because I find very few people that can actually come together with me and talk to me about these things. What we need to do is recognize what I'm saying on the one side and on the other side. Recognize that we need to represent that middle, heightened consciousness light that Jesus was talking about, so that these other sides will be exposed for what they are. When I came over to California, after some time and some growth, and meeting a lot of really lousy, broken, lost people, I was able to examine what makes those people lost, just like I had already had my whole life experience examining what makes those people lost and trapped on the East Coast. It took me a while, but they're lost in the same way that the others are lost, but in different ways of being lost. You can't tell them that, and you can't tell them that. You can tell these people that only because they want to see what they see and they want to put them down to see it, and you can tell these people that because they want to see what they want to see, but you can't tell either side. Look and see what I'm saying. Be truthful with yourself. Rise to the light. Jesus had the same problem. Jesus had the same problem, and he said he didn't come to make all that happen. He came only for those that he came for. And you can choose whether you want to be one of those people or not. But you've got to see things for what they are. You've got to seek heightened consciousness. Don't put your faith in somebody. So why do I even do this? Why do I waste my time on this very narrow path that few people come to? Because this is the way it is. And you go look at it, you'll see that it's the way that it is. And when you see it, you won't be listening to me. You'll have had God answer the door when you knocked, and you'll see the things. And when you see the things, you will be free. Your conscience will heighten. You will go and sin no more. You will grow, and all the things you do will be addressing your reaction to these things that you see. People don't come that are immersed. They don't get what I'm saying. Most of them just goes right over their head. So I do invite you, if you find yourself immersed and you want somebody to aid you, but don't come to me as an aid or a leader, because then I'd be failing. I can only be a guide, and then you have to use those things and find it. But now, once you have found it, and if you get to the point where you know what I'm saying is true, not because I'm saying it, because these things I've shown you in the world are there, and you see them for what they are, then you can come to me and we can talk as brothers. You won't need anything from me, and I won't need anything from you, but I'll be glad that I met you, because it's very rare to find another person in this world that has that ability, that knows they're on that road, and doesn't just say it and gather with a bunch of believers that say it so they feel more secure, but they get there with validity and value because they know why they got there, and it perfectly mirrors Jesus' teachings. That's hard to find. And, one of the verses that says to not forsake the assembling of you together, one of the things that Jesus told us, that's been one of my hardest things to deal with, because how do you know if you're assembling together? Jesus said, whenever two or more are gathered in his name, there's love, and I'm with him. That's the best way I could do it. And that's kind of why I say that's what the basis of the most basic, simple church is. You've got to have that essence between two people to be there, to be gathered in that. And I think that's why there's marriage, and for that reason, a man will leave his mother and father. because that's the essence of what is necessary for the first building blocks of the foundation of the church on that rock. Later, the disciples, some of the people would come to say, it's better that a man not be married. And it's for things like that that make me say, I think they've got it wrong again, just like those priests did when they were talking to the Jews. They're already missing things, and they're going to cause others to stumble because they're listening to what someone says instead of the Holy Spirit and what Jesus is teaching show. And those stumbling blocks are prevalent and clearly laid out in the Old Testament. Jesus pointed things out all through his life and his teachings. But even then, God said, if you do this, you will receive this. If you do this, you will receive this. You see the story, it's all on the pages. You see what they actually did, and you see that what God said would happen, happened. And that's why Jesus had to come, because they had failed. If you understand that, then you just transfer that and you say, okay, this is how these people are doing this in the New Testament. They're doing it again. They're getting it wrong. They're putting their faith in man. They're lost, they're blind, they're on one side leaning instead of in the middle. And the other ones that are pushing that aside, seeing their failures. I don't even know if they're seeing their failures. Maybe they're just doing whatever they want to do. You can't speak for everybody anyway, right? But they're glad to have that freedom they have, because it's not that. They know that these people on the East Coast have proven that they're wrong for so long. Now out here, they're pointing fingers at them. Just like these people are saying, look, you're doing that, you're doing that, you're doing that. Yeah, you're right, you are doing those things. But that's not enough to say that this is wrong and that you're right. You're both wrong because you're not of the middle way. You're not of Jesus' light, of his teachings. You're both missing the mark. This is what we, in heightened consciousness, in Conscious Counseling 101, need to be thinking about and addressing. And talk with me about this. And I'd like you to, anything you think you need help with, that you just can't get past somehow on your own. Let me give you a few indicators of where to look. And then you go look and you see whether or not those things help. That's, as a counselor, that's what I do. And I have to be open with you. And I hopefully don't scare you away that I talk about these things, because if you're not into believing that anything in a book or that man has passed down through the generations or whatever could possibly be of God, it's very difficult for me to help you, because first off, I'm not just giving you a hand and holding you and pulling you up. I'm using tested and tried things, showing you results and telling you why it works in the first place, and then showing you if it did work or not. And I can talk about instances of all things in life. If you talk to me about a subject you think is too difficult, it's not going to be too difficult. Everything's addressed. There's nothing new under the sun. And there's nothing that the Word and the understanding of the concepts and the context and the history of mankind and the living Word won't help with. Talk with me. So to sum up, moving to California was a final thing for me to understand. So I came to the next step. I became involved. And so when I got involved, I came to understand. That's worth something. That one thing alone was worth moving to California for me. Because I needed that value-added thing that couldn't be totally given to me any other way. But because I was ready to soak it up like a sponge, and I was prepared, and my life was able to receive, I gained so much by that. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody comes to California is going to get that. No, you'd have to have heightened conscious already. You'd have to already know what you're doing. You have to already have the tools in your hands in order to find value-added growth like that. Conscious Counseling 101 is something that I've set up to help people have the tools to find value-added growth and apply it to all the things they do in their life. Getting back on this. I've been working with my career and things lately. It's got to be done. It's got to be done. You got needs. You got to have them taken care of. You got to have balance. I took a little break from this. I put a little invitation out recently. Some of the guys that I might know in life might come over here. I don't think they will. I think they're not going to come over here because the people that I associate with, I associate for different reasons than what's making them them. They can't identify with me. Like, for instance, if you watched the last video, the crossover video, Batman. Batman, for most people, is a vengeful assailant that goes in, fixes the situation with power and strength and ability, and moves on. I don't see him that way. I see him in an unusual way. I see it for the struggle between the two identities. Struggle between the child and the man, the coast and the coast, the heightened conscious shutting off this or shutting off that to become the middle. I see him with this ultimate instrument that he works on himself. And through the ability to work on himself, he gains the ability to aid in the world. But I don't see him as vengeful as some of the paintings and stories have been told. I see him as an articulate master. I relate that to heightened conscious. And all my other bad buddies, they don't see it that way. It's not very exciting, is it? It's much more to have the power and all that stuff. It's much more fun. So I didn't expect them to come over and get into the inner workings of the behind the mask guy, because it's about that stuff. Most people that I know, and I've spent a lifetime immersed in the Batman community, they don't see any of that. If you do happen to be over here and you're seeing this video now and you say, oh, that's not me, no, you got that one wrong. Great, tell me. Even if you think I'm off, go ahead and take the time and type something out. Tell me where I'm off. I'll work on it. I'll look at it closer. And I'll take that as a value added thing that you've offered. And in our growth and heightened conscious seeking, we should all be willing to do that. One of the roads to heightened intelligence is to be able to take in all things and thoroughly look at them and consider them without ever having to feel as though you have to bring them in to your life and accept them. But come to see what they are. Come to see what they are for what they are. Wisdom and experience and understanding of the context of the value of Jesus' teachings will help you to do that. Conscious counseling will help you to do those things, to find those things so that you can do that. You could do it on your own, but if you want someone to talk to while you're doing it, that's what I'm here for.